My cruel parents treated me like a stepdaughter. One day, I was baking a cake, and everything was in disorder. My mother stormed into the kitchen, shouting, "You idiot! Why did you destroy my kitchen?" She slapped me hard across the face, then took my finished cake and rubbed it into my face. My angry father also shouted, "You idiot! You are wasting your time." They kicked me out of the house. I decided on revenge, and the very next day, the police were at their doorstep. I was never the child my parents wanted. I could tell from the moment I was born that I wasn't the one they had hoped for. My father always wanted a son. He dreamed of a boy to teach his love for sports, to carry on his name. But when I was born, he hid his disappointment well, at least on the outside. It didn't take long, though, before I realized I wasn't the child they expected. I wasn't even their favorite. That title was reserved for Emily, my older sister. She was everything my parents wanted in a child: smart, successful, and with a promising future in finance. She excelled at everything. From a young age, Emily was the star of the family. Every time there was a family gathering or a visit to the neighbors, my parents couldn't stop talking about her latest achievement. "Did you hear? Emily got another A in her math test." Or, "Emily has just been selected for an internship at the bank. She'll be making more money than any of us." It was always about Emily. And me? Well, I was just there. I was Sophie, the one who could never quite measure up. It didn't help that Emily was 3 years older than me. She had a head start, and no matter how hard I tried, I could never quite get the attention my sister seemed to have no trouble earning. I started to feel like I was invisible. Even as a little girl, I noticed that when I did something, anything really, it never seemed to matter. I could bring home good grades, or even a trophy from a school competition, but no one noticed. But Emily? She didn't even have to try. She got praised for everything she did. As I grew older, I learned to fend for myself. I made my own lunches, did my own laundry, and figured out my homework without anyone's help. I think that's when I began to realize that no one was going to care if I succeeded or failed. If I wanted something, I had to go out and get it on my own. But it wasn't always so bad. There was one thing that kept me going through the years: baking. It all started when I was about 12. I was at Aunt Lily's house one afternoon when I noticed she was baking a cake. Aunt Lily was always so kind to me. She treated me like I mattered. I stood by the kitchen counter, watching her carefully measure the ingredients, and something clicked inside me. I wanted to try that. She let me help her, and she even taught me how to make my first cake. That moment, standing next to her in the kitchen, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: important. After that, I began baking in secret, trying new recipes in the kitchen when no one was home. I wasn't very good at first, but I didn't care. It was the one thing I could do where I felt proud of myself. I was able to make something that tasted good, something people liked, and for the first time, I felt like I was good at something. When I got to college, I decided to try baking a cake for my parents. I wanted them to see me, really see me, and I hoped that maybe, just maybe, they would notice the effort I had put into something that made me happy. I spent hours in the kitchen, carefully following the recipe Aunt Lily had shared with me. My hands trembled with excitement as I finished the cake and placed it on the dining table, hoping to get a reaction. But when my mom walked into the room, I didn't see what I had hoped for. She barely glanced at the cake, and instead, her eyes immediately darted to the messy kitchen. "What is all this?" she demanded. "Why is the kitchen such a disaster? Do you think you're in a restaurant, Sophie's?" My heart sank. I had worked so hard, and this was the response I got? But I kept quiet. Mom stormed over to the cake, her face red with anger. "You call this a cake?" she scoffed before lifting it off the table and, without warning, rubbing the frosting all over my face. "There's no place for this in our house. You need to focus on your studies. You're not a cook, Sophie. You'll never amount to anything in a kitchen." I was in shock. The sting from her slap still echoed on my cheek, and now my face was covered in frosting. My dad stood in the corner of the room, not saying a word. But I could see it in his eyes: disappointment. It was as if I had just ruined my one chance to earn their approval. And at that moment I realized that I would never get it. "Leave," my father said coldly. We don't need you here, making messes in our home. Get out, Sophie. You're not welcome. And just like that, I was thrown out of the house. My own parents had kicked me out for doing something I loved. I couldn't understand it. Was it really so wrong to have a passion for baking? Was I really so worthless in their eyes? I spent the night in my car, crying, trying to make sense of everything that had happened. I didn't know where to go, but then I thought of Aunt Lily. She was the one person in my life who had always made me feel like I mattered. I picked up my phone, dialed her number, and in a tearful voice, I told her everything. "Come stay with me," Aunt Lily said without hesitation. "You'll always have a place here. Don't worry about your parents. They don't know what they're missing." So, I left my childhood home behind and moved in with Aunt Lily. She gave me a sense of peace, a sense of belonging that I had never known before. And in a way, her support gave me the strength to continue on my path. My parents had made their choice, and now I would make mine. I couldn't rely on them, so I would rely on myself. With Aunt Lily's encouragement, I finished my business degree, but deep down, I knew my heart wasn't in it. Baking was my passion. I had no desire to be a part of the corporate world. But I kept pushing forward because I didn't want to disappoint Aunt Lily. I knew that if she was proud of me, I would be able to stand tall. Little by little, I started baking more and more, and eventually I took a professional baking course, something I knew would help me build the life I dreamed of. My parents never called. They didn't care about my dreams. But Aunt Lily did. She helped me find the courage to be who I really was. And so, I took my first steps toward my future. I decided to follow my heart, no matter how much my parents hated it. But little did I know, the biggest challenge was still to come. After moving in with Aunt Lily, things slowly began to settle down. It wasn't easy, of course. I had so many emotions running through me. The pain of being rejected by my own parents, the anger, and the feeling of failure, it all weighed heavily on me. But Aunt Lily was always there for me. She never judged. She simply supported me and encouraged me to keep going. She didn't care about my parents' approval. She cared about me, and for the first time in my life, I truly felt seen. I continued with my business degree, though it was hard to focus on something that didn't ignite any passion in me. But I pushed through because Aunt Lily was so proud of me. And she was always telling me how proud she was of my baking. "Sophie," she'd say, "you have a gift. You can turn any basic ingredient into something extraordinary." It wasn't just empty praise. She meant it. And it made all the difference. One day, after I had finished my degree, I finally made the decision to pursue what truly made me happy. I enrolled in a professional baking course. It wasn't easy to tell Aunt Lily, but I knew it was the right thing to do. "I'm doing it," I said, my voice a mixture of excitement and fear. "I'm going to make baking my career." Aunt Lily smiled wide and hugged me. "I knew you would," she said. "I've always known." She believed in me, and that belief became the fuel I needed to get started. The course was intense, but I loved every minute of it. I spent countless hours learning everything I could about baking, everything from the simplest cakes to intricate pastries. Every day, I worked hard to perfect my skills. When I finished the course, I felt confident. I was ready to open my own bakery, to finally put my heart into something that made me happy. I saved up every penny I could, and with Aunt Lily's encouragement, I took the plunge. I rented a small space in the heart of Chicago and opened my cake shop. I called it Sophie's Sweet Creations. It was my own little corner of the world where I could do what I loved and hopefully be successful at it. At first, business was slow. I didn't mind, though. I expected it. Word of mouth is a powerful tool, and with every cake I baked, I knew I was getting better. I made sure each creation was beautiful and tasted even better. Slowly, more and more customers came, and soon enough, I had regulars. They returned, not just for the cakes, but for the personal touch I put into everything I made. My shop started getting attention in the local community, and that was enough to keep me going. Despite my growing success, I couldn't bring myself to tell my parents. I hadn't heard from them since I left, and part of me was terrified they would never approve. I didn't want their judgment, their rejection. I didn't want them to tell me that I was wasting my life and my time. But even though I feared their disapproval, I couldn't help but feel proud of what I was building. Meanwhile, Emily, my older sister, was living her life, and from what I could tell, everything was perfect. She had graduated from a prestigious finance school and secured a high-paying job at a bank. My parents constantly talked about her. Every time I saw them, it was always the same thing. Did you hear, Sophie? Emily got a promotion. She's going to be managing her own department soon. Or, Emily's already getting offers from other banks. They're all impressed with her skills. I could never escape it. My parents' praise for Emily echoed in my ears all the time, reminding me that no matter what I did, I was always going to be second place. But that wasn't going to stop me anymore. I had my bakery, my passion, and my aunt's belief in me. That was enough. I worked day and night, baking cakes for weddings, birthdays, and corporate events. Business picked up more quickly than I had expected. I even had a few local magazines write about my shop, which helped bring in more customers. The media attention felt surreal. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was doing something important. People were taking notice, and I was finally getting the recognition I deserved, not from my parents, but from the people who appreciated what I was doing. And then, one day, as I was wrapping up a cake order, I overheard something that made my stomach drop. I was watching the news when the story flashed across the screen. It was about Emily. My sister had been arrested for involvement in a massive fraud scheme at the bank where she worked. I froze. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Emily? The perfect one? The one my parents always praised? I thought it had to be a mistake. But as the details unfolded, the truth hit me hard. Emily had been part of a team involved in embezzling millions of dollars. The arrest was just the beginning of her downfall. I didn't know what to feel. Shock, confusion, maybe even a bit of anger, but mostly I felt nothing. It was hard to explain. I had always looked up to Emily, and yet here she was, involved in a scandal that was going to ruin everything she had worked for. But I still couldn't bring myself to contact my parents. I hadn't spoken to them in so long, and honestly, part of me was relieved that they would finally see the truth. Emily wasn't perfect. She wasn't the golden child they always made her out to be. But the story wasn't over. The worst was yet to come. The news of Emily's arrest didn't just shake me. It rattled the very foundation of everything I had believed about my family. For years, I had been living under the weight of their expectations, feeling like I could never live up to the standards set by Emily. But now, seeing her downfall, it felt like some kind of cruel cosmic justice. She had always been the golden child, the one my parents showered with love and praise. And yet, here she was, embroiled in a criminal scandal. I didn't know whether I should feel sorry for her or just relieved. In some twisted way, I felt like I had been right all along. She wasn't the perfect daughter my parents had made her out to be. Still, I wasn't sure if I was ready to reach out to my parents. I had spent years convincing myself I didn't need their approval, but the thought of them now, in a crisis, seeking me out, it was hard to ignore. The days passed, and I kept working, burying myself in my bakery. I had built something from the ground up, and now it was thriving. My cakes were more popular than ever, and I was starting to see the fruits of all my hard work. I was proud of what I had created, proud of who I had become. But even in my success, the silence from my parents lingered. Then, one day, as I was closing the shop after a long day, I saw a familiar number on my phone screen. It was my mom's number. I hesitated for a moment before picking up. "Sophie, it's Mom," she said, her voice shaky. "We need to talk. It's about Emily." I wanted to hang up. I didn't want to listen to their pleas. I had spent my entire life being overlooked, and now they were asking for help after everything they had done to me? But a small part of me was curious. So I stayed on the line. "She's been arrested, Sophie. She's facing years in prison for what she's done," my mother continued. "We don't know what to do. We've lost everything. Your father, he's so upset and we're struggling. We need you." I felt a cold sense of anger rise in me. My parents, who had never once supported my dreams, were now calling me for help. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my emotions in check. Part of me wanted to just hang up and forget them. But another part of me, the part that had been desperate for their approval for so long, wanted to reach out, to offer some kind of comfort. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself.
No, Mom.
I'm not helping you. You made your choice when you kicked me out of the house. You disowned me for pursuing my passion. Now you want my help?
No.
I'm done with you. There was silence on the other end of the line. I could hear her muffled sobs, but I didn't feel any sympathy. For so long, I had tried to please them, to gain their love and approval. But they had pushed me away, humiliated me, and shown me time and time again that I didn't matter. This was my moment of revenge. I wasn't going to let them walk all over me anymore. I've built something real, Mom.
I have my own life now.
You and Dad made your choices, and I'm making mine, I said, my voice steady and firm. Goodbye. And just like that, I ended the call. I felt a strange sense of relief wash over me. It wasn't the closure I had imagined, but it was what I needed. I had taken control of my life, and I wasn't going to let them drag me back into their mess. The next few days were quiet. My business continued to thrive, and I grew more confident in my decisions. But as time went on, I found myself reflecting on what had happened. My parents had rejected me, disowned me, and dismissed my dreams. But in doing so, they had shown me the truth. I didn't need their approval to be successful. I had built this life on my own, and it was mine to live. I wasn't sure if Emily would ever reach out to me, but a part of me hoped that, just like me, she would find her way, follow her heart, and build her own life, not the life our parents had forced upon her. Life has a funny way of working itself out. After everything that had happened, I never imagined I'd find peace. For so long, I thought I would always carry the weight of my parents' rejection, their harsh words, and the feeling of being unwanted. But with time, something shifted within me. I built something real, something I could be proud of. Slowly, the anger and hurt began to fade. My bakery had grown beyond anything I could have hoped for. I opened 2 more locations, and my cakes gained recognition all over the city. Local food critics started writing about my shop, and I even appeared on a popular TV show. I was living the life I had always dreamed of, doing what I loved and succeeding on my own terms. I had never been this happy. Then one day, something unexpected happened. It was just another afternoon, and I was icing a wedding cake when my phone rang. The number on the screen was unfamiliar, but I answered it anyway. "Sophie, it's Emily," came the voice on the other end. My heart skipped a beat. Emily? After everything that had happened, I never thought I'd hear from her again. "Emily?" I said, unsure of how to react. How are you?" She sighed deeply. "I know this is out of nowhere, but I need to apologize.
For everything.
For the way Mom and Dad treated you, and for the things I did." Her voice trembled. I spent so long trying to meet their expectations. But it was never what I wanted.
I've finally realized that.
And seeing you follow your dreams gave me the courage to change. I was silent for a moment, trying to process what she was saying. Years of silence and distance, and now she was apologizing for things I never thought I would hear. "I enrolled in interior design courses, Sophie," she continued, voice full of emotion. "I realized I was chasing a life that wasn't mine. Now I'm following my passion, just like you." A lump formed in my throat. Emily, the one who had always been perfect in our parents' eyes, was now living her truth. I never expected this. But here she was, telling me she was pursuing her own dreams. "I'm proud of you, Emily," I said softly. "I really am." We talked for hours that day, sharing our struggles, fears, and hopes. It felt like we were finally understanding each other in a way we never had before. I realized that, despite everything, I had missed her. The sister I once looked up to was now finding her own way, just like I had. It felt good to talk openly. In the following weeks, Emily and I rebuilt our relationship. We met for coffee, visited each other's homes, and shared experiences. I was genuinely happy for her. She had found a new path, and so had I. Our parents, however, stayed silent. It was clear they had chosen their path without us. But in a strange way, that didn't matter anymore. I had found my happiness and success. I didn't need their approval. I had built my life with Aunt Lily's support, and now, with Emily's understanding, I felt complete. Then one day, my parents reached out. After years of silence, they called to meet. I hesitated, but knew I had to. We met at a cafe. They looked older, tired. My father spoke first. "Sophie, we were wrong. We pushed you away when we should have supported you. We're sorry." I could feel the anger rising, but I had changed. "I forgive you," I said. "But it's too late. You made your choices. I made mine." And with that, I walked away, feeling closure I never expected. Their apology didn't change anything. I had already found my family in those who truly cared for me: Aunt Lily, Daniel, and now Emily. I had learned that the people who reject you don't define you. Only you can write your own story. And for the first time, I was truly free.